We all know Doom, one of the biggest pop culture references in video game history, and we all know this guy, Hugo Martin, the creative visionary behind Doom and Doom Eternal. I wanted to share with you the crazy advice he gave me, which were the keys to his success. Let's get started. Okay, so really quick, I just want to thank Skillshare for sponsoring this video, and if you like learning and you like this channel and you want to help out and make sure that future videos like this one get made, take a second to click the link below this video and you'll get instant access to Skillshare's learning platform for free for 2 months. So not only will you get access to all of their classes, which are hundreds of them, you'll specifically be able to find all the information you need on very niche topics that us as creatives love to get into, whether it is how to use a camera or more the technical side, such as how a camera sensor works or how to get that perfect shot. Everything you need to know is in there, as well as how to learn compositing, such as with After Effects or many of the other compositing software on the platform. In addition, you better learn Max, Maya, Houdini, every single 3D tool that you can imagine. I'm a big fan of learning just in time rather than just in case. So in other words, I want to have instant access to the information that I need at that specific time. So I love being able to log into Skillshare and have access to all of their classes and be able to find exactly what I need when I need it, and then be able to get back to what I'm doing right away. So, like I said, if you want to take advantage of this offer, click the link below this video to get instant access to Skillshare's premium level membership for 2 free months. So take advantage of this offer by clicking the link below right now. And thanks for supporting this channel. I want to sit down with my friend Hugo Martin, the visionary behind Doom and Doom Eternal over at id Software, and I wanted to deconstruct a lot of his insights and his success that he's had over his career and turn them into actionable steps that you can apply today so that you can build your success in the future that you deserve in the creative industry. So this is part of the Deconstructed series where I break down conversations and interviews that I've had with thought leaders into actionable steps that you can apply today to get the results and the success that you deserve as a creative artist. In this video, we break down everything from the core 4 rules that if you want to work at id Software or any creative industry really, that you need to harness. And we go deep into those to deconstruct every single aspect of that. This should be a check list for you to be able to make sure that you align with these so that way you can be the best artist you can be and really leverage these in your career. We dig deep into a lot of the books that he owes to a lot of his success, as well as a lot of the other things that he did to really be able to step up his game. Everything from writing to doing stand-up comedy in LA to get over the fear of humiliation or speaking in front of crowds, as well as people not liking what he does. There's a lot that we get into. I think this is really fascinating to really deconstruct a lot of these key things into 7 actionable steps that you can apply to get the most out of your creative career and set yourself up for the future. Finally, if you don't want to miss out on learning new skills to build the success and future that you deserve as an artist, whether you're in film, TV, games, or design, or any other creative industry, make sure to click the subscribe button down the bottom right of the video so that way you can shortcut your path to unstoppable money and remove the friction holding you back from unleashing everything that's bottled up to land your dream job and never look back. I guess one thing that we should get into, I wanted to do a whole thing on who Hugo is, how he got started, let's get to know him. But really, I want to get into the meat of this. The main thing you need to know about Hugo is that he worked for Blur Studio for quite a long time, doing a lot of really amazing cinematic work and a lot of other cool stuff. I believe he worked at Naughty Dog for quite a while too, as well as working on Pacific Rim directly for Guillermo del Toro, actually working in his garage on the movie, which was pretty cool. And eventually he went on to work as the creative director on Doom. So this was actually Doom 2016. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but there was originally another Doom before that. And that was more what people refer to as Call of Doom, because it was very similar to Call of Duty. And that eventually got shelved. And they then went back to the drawing block and came up with what we all saw today. I remember hanging out just after Doom 16 was released with Hugo and Jason and a bunch of the other guys over at id. They would always refer to Doom 2016 as Doom 5, because in their mind, they had Doom 4, it just never came out. These days, it's referred to as Doom 4 Classic, right? That being said, one interesting fact I thought would be fun to throw in there was a time in my life where I was approached to actually be the creative director for Doom. And this wasn't Hugo's job, this was actually the original Doom Classic that I mentioned. And that was, I think, in 2009 or roughly around that time. And I always thought it was kind of funny because that would have been my dream job. And for one reason or another, I turned it down, mainly because I went to Germany and did a movie over there and a bunch of other stuff. In some ways, it would have been a really amazing opportunity, but in another way, it would have been 2-3 years of my life. And in this case, looking back, probably a project that would have been shelved. I ended up having dinner with the creative director who ended up taking that job years and years later while Doom 4 Classic was in production. And it was pretty fascinating just kind of hearing about it all because like Rage was going on, Doom was going on, there's a lot of different projects that were being in development, and then seeing Blur, what they had done with the kind of conceptual cinematics for it as well, which I believe are leaked and online. It's been pretty amazing, or fascinating I should say, to see the development of Doom over the years. This is something that I kind of really owe a lot of my career to, because it was something that inspired me to get into doing computer art back in the day. So in a lot of ways I've been kind of tied to this one way or another, just indirectly over the years, but it's been really fascinating to get to know Hugo and a lot of the team at id. One of my students ended up becoming the effects lead at id Software for quite a long time, so she was in charge of the effects department, which is really cool after she did the effects TD mentorship. So it's just been really fascinating to kind of see all of this stuff kind of building up. That being said, there's a lot that we get into and we really deconstruct here that really is what got Hugo his job at id. Not so much that he had all these skills that he acquired based on what we're talking about here, but it really was a journey to get him prepared for this amazing project in a lot of ways. Like a lot of the life skills he learned along the way really allowed it to pay off in full when it came to Doom. So these are the 7 key insights I want to break into. The first one is creating urgency. So there's several parts of Hugo's career that he can look back on where he's created a false sense of urgency, and that is that he's put time constraints or put himself in a level of discomfort which allowed him to excel. And I think that this is really critical to think about and think how this can apply to you. One thing that's really funny is looking back at Hugo going to college and learning he had to pay a fortune for his tuition. And that meant that he had college student loans that he's paying back for decades after. I think he's still paying back $1,100 a month at the moment. And that massive investment in himself was just about the skill as well as it was about the money itself. By putting that much in, you want to make sure that you're 10xing whatever you're getting back out. So to quote him, knowing that crippling debt was something that could completely ruin his life was the boot in his ass that he needed. So that external pressure really pushed him to make sure his education would really count and really helped him push towards something that he could get a lot from to lead towards getting the job of his dreams. Another thing that we talk a lot about is that he really pushed himself to invest in all these different areas that would make him a better storyteller, make him a better leader, a better communicator, and a lot of different areas as well. And knowing that he had made an agreement with his wife that I believe at 29 they wanted to start a family, that meant that time was running out for him. And that was something that they agreed that he could go off and do all these things and really do some crazy stuff that he could invest back into himself, knowing that time was running out. He had a set deadline, meaning that everything he did, he had to really go hard and make sure that he got everything he could within the time frame that he had. So this meant that he was learning to write better, he was learning to do stand-up comedy, and many other areas that he was willing to devote a lot of late nights to and really spend investing himself. So there were times where he would be going midweek to comedy bars all over LA to do stand-up and other places that he could really learn to hone his craft. So knowing full well that that chapter of his life was going to be ending soon, he'd need to switch gears and focus more on responsibilities, meant that he could really compress that time down and push himself to get the most done that was possible in the time frame that he had. I'll talk more about this later on, but comedy for him meant getting over the fear of crowds, learning timing and delivery, as well as even the humiliation that comes with going on and putting out jokes that maybe no one laughs at. And that humiliation helped serve him better as a leader and being able to take criticism and be able to give and take feedback a lot better, both as an artist and a manager later in his career. Another thing he did, which I think is really fascinating, is that he would be quitting jobs before he ever had anything lined up. So something that I talk a lot about is lining up the next project before you quit the current one. Let's say that if you're quitting one job, make sure you have the next one lined up, so that way you've got room to negotiate, knowing that you've got options. There's a lot of different things to do with that. In addition, if you were to change careers, let's say from doing architecture into visual effects, you don't just say one day, I'm going to be a VFX artist. You typically will moonlight and set up that second career until it has enough momentum that you can jump from one to the other. Now, that's completely the opposite of what Hugo did. So while I say everything is momentum, I think that it's good to take this with a grain of salt, because Hugo was someone who had extraordinary ability. He was a beast at what he did. And when you have the confidence of knowing that you've got a lot of connections in the industry and that there's a lot that you can leverage, it is a lot more reassuring knowing you can get the next job. But I like the fact that he was able to put himself in that position where he'd leave one job knowing that would give him this pressure of making sure the next job came quickly, and that he was giving it everything he could to create those opportunities in that time frame. So again, I think that the false time constraint and the pressure that you put on yourself is really important to be able to jump ship knowing I got to get a job. I'm going to call up everyone. I'm going to create all the opportunities I can, rather than staying stagnant at your current job instead of moving forward all the time. And we'll touch more on this later on, but I think part of this, which is a really good key takeaway to have, is that he would want to leave a job before he was ready to, because he'd gotten everything he wanted from it, but he could also tell that he's getting very comfortable where he was too. In other words, it's very easy for us to stay stagnant at one place rather than put ourselves out of our comfort zone and throw ourselves back out into the real world in time for more opportunities to come up. Knowing that if we stay at our current job, we could live here comfortably forever, but it means that our career kind of flat lines instead of continuing to evolve and pushing ourselves. So that is where he would constantly throw himself back into the chaos to help adapt and grow and keep moving forward. And I think that there's a lot of good, valuable advice here to take and apply, but at the same time, it's easy to be like, well, if Hugo just quits his job and does it, maybe I should do the same, when it's more about strategy and putting yourself out there. So again, adapt with the surroundings you have, but always constantly put yourself out of your comfort zone as well, which again is something that we'll touch on in a moment. So on my podcast, we talk a lot about false time constraints for that exact reason. I talk a lot about how having a 90-day year, for instance, is a good way of typically condensing an entire year into 3 months, which forces you to get results faster. So I always talk about attack with urgency and fail fast. In other words, attack everything with aggression, create as many opportunities as you can, but also be willing to fail quickly so that way you can see the results quicker. I think that if we all have that New Year's resolution that I'm going to go and do this crazy thing or work on a short film, make a new app, whatever it might be, giving ourselves a year, we tend to lull after a while and we don't even notice we're doing it. When we have a condensed time frame, it means that 1 week where we're not moving forward, we can instantly identify that and notice that we got to course correct. So again, those condensed time frames are really important here. So there's nothing worse than getting complacent and slowing down. So you got to keep that fire under your butt. Number 2, eating your fruit and vegetables. A lot of the time we want to skip past the core learning and get to the fun stuff. So I always say everyone wants to be an expert, no one's willing to start as a novice. Hugo says the same thing, that we all want to learn to draw cool monsters and do cool work, but we're not willing to learn the basics, learning the core principles, learning anatomy, allowing ourselves to move on to bigger things. So we're in such a hurry to get to the end that we skip the journey by looking for shortcuts and cheats and everything that we can, and ultimately it reflects on our work and also our work ethic in the long run as well. So Doom 2016 has a lot of depth in so many different ways, and that's because Hugo learned to be a production designer, which meant rather than learning just to draw, you would learn the research bit by bit and build out a Bible of everything, including the mood, the colors, the feel, every aspect of what you're trying to create before you even get a chance to create. So he owes a lot of his success and his craft to learning the depth of knowledge that it takes to really be a strong artist, rather than just skimming over the surface and focusing too much on trying to jump to the finish line like I talked about. So I feel this way about some people who leave YouTube comments occasionally, so don't hate, but there are occasionally people who leave a comment like, your video is too long, just make it 5 bullet points, make it a 2-minute video and get it over with. So those are the people who typically never grasp the knowledge and they never apply it in the first place. It's all surface level reading. It's kind of like picking up the back of a book and skimming over the cover and then calling yourself an expert. So to summarize that, like, context is everything. And without that, you're just skimming over a cheat sheet and you're not really internalizing it or understanding the why or how it works. And that's typically how all of this resonates. So we get into this later, but Hugo focused less on understanding the software and more about reading books and expanding his knowledge on topics that would make him stronger in all the different areas that he needed to grow on. And that helped prepare him exactly for all the areas in his journey later on in his career to have more success and be able to really adapt to those situations. So finally, state change. And this is something that Hugo talked about, where while he would be doing projects, there's times he'd fall into this kind of euphoric state. And that is just the confidence of knowing that you're ready, you're prepared for the job. And that's because he put in the time to really craft his skills and better himself and put in the time into the areas that he needed. He didn't just learn the software and then constantly freak out like, oh my God, I don't know how to do this, or making poor decisions. He focused more on investing back into his core skills, the core things that are really going to help him grow long term. And it meant that he knew how to communicate better, how to ask the right questions, how to mentally prepare himself better, be more organized, be more productive. All the things that are really critical for us to be able to be a better artist, but also be a better leader and be overall better at what we do in our career. We're more clear on what we need to do. So this is what made a world of difference to him. This is what he referred to as being a euphoric state of confidence. It would be putting him into a place where he'd put in the work early in his career that later in his career, he was unstoppable. He'd be able to sit down and knock the work right out of the ballpark every single time because he had that core depth of knowledge that he had applied and learned and gained over his career rather than focusing on all the shiny stuff. Number 3, understanding your place. I think this is a really critical one that a lot of us should be able to learn from. As commercial artists, it's very easy to get caught up in taking ownership of a project that isn't really yours. In other words, being a little bit too close to something and feeling like that you have creative control over everything. So that was a really valuable lesson for him, that he was able to understand that this isn't his project. When someone's investing $1 million or hundreds of millions of dollars into a project, that you are the creative, but ultimately you need to align what your vision is with the vision of the person who's paying. That it's a balancing act of knowing what you want, but also what others want who have the say. We're there to execute someone else's creative vision. So we should take responsibility and pride in what we do, but also realize it's a collaborative process and it's our job to understand the other's creative needs and also how to execute on them as well. It's easy to get ego and insecurities to really derail us, and that ends up becoming a problem. So something we get into later on is that talent is replaceable. In other words, if you're really talented and skilled at what you do, but you have an ego or chip on your shoulder, or you're just not easy or pleasant to work with, then you're someone that is easily able to be replaced with that other person who maybe isn't as good as you, but they're easy to work with. And ultimately, the morale of the entire company is a lot more important than one person's needs. And to make the entire project all about you is really that red flag saying that there's something going on that needs to be corrected. So like I said, we touch on this later, but talent is replaceable. Number 4, getting out of your comfort zone. So Hugo regularly leaned into his fears as well as pursued experience over software. So he'd constantly get out of his comfort zone and pursue things that terrified him or that were really hard to do, and invest his time into building real-world skills that would allow him to be a better leader, as well as focus more on growth. So Hugo knew to be a better director, he would need to learn to tell stories, and that meant learning to write, as well as learning storytelling in the many different forms. And this also meant, as I mentioned earlier, about learning comedy as well. So he would go out and do stand-up at different comedy bars all over LA on like Tuesday nights. And I think this is one of the most challenging things to do, not only because most people are afraid of doing public speaking, but timing and execution is everything. And what he got from doing this all the time was getting over the fear of speaking in front of crowds, but also learning to be funny and having the right timing and delivery as well. And this also meant about being able to get the audience to react exactly how you want every single time. But this also meant dealing with rejection. So if the audience would boo you or a joke would land flat, so this really numbed his reaction to failure, which helped him down the line in his career with not being so rattled when people criticized his work or shot down one of his ideas. So by leaning into his fears, this helped him really get a new sense of confidence with everything that he was doing. Anytime that he found those fears, he could lean into those and be able to learn new skills that he could add to his arsenal. So whether it was creativity, confidence, story, or leadership, he constantly called this the soul-searching creative bootcamp. And I like that. I like that you can put a name on it because then it becomes a thing. So this really helped him internalize growth and focus as 2 key levers to really lean into to be able to double down and get the success that you need. So on the podcast, I regularly talk about staying out of your comfort zone and doing what scares you, because outside of your comfort is exactly where real growth happens. Number 5, id Software core values. So there are 4 core values over at id, and I remember the effects lead on Doom, Virginia, who was one of my students in my mentorship. I remember her mentioning this to me one time, that there are 4 key areas that they focus on: hard skills, soft skills, team skills, and fundamentals. So what that means is that hard skills, meaning more surface level stuff such as knowing the software. And this is the area that most of us put our emphasis on. And this is what drives me crazy, because this is the area that makes you highly replaceable, because all you're doing is learning the buttons. That's not going to make you a better artist. It's not going to make you a Hugo. It's not going to make you a leader in what you do. So a lot of the key hard skills would be do great work on time, or better yet, do work early or on time, but do it well on time. So hopefully that makes sense. But that means do really good work, but make sure you're not slow, you're not screwing up the pipeline by not making your schedule, making sure the promises that you set out you're actually keeping to. And if you want to do it faster, make sure that you're at least doing good work. No one cares if you're pumping out subpar work. You want to take pride in what you do and do a good job, but make sure you're also keeping to the schedule, because you are one of many people in that big machine of talent knocking out hard work and doing great work, but it always has to meet that level of quality as well as meeting the schedule. So do good work early or on time, but do it well. So Hugo mentions to put in the mileage while you're young as a student and improve on your hard skills through doing mileage and repetition. So Arnold Schwarzenegger always talks about reps, reps, reps. In other words, you do things over and over and over and you get better, better, better at it. Don't be afraid to continue to go back and repeat everything that you're doing, making sure that you're getting better in your craft. That's why I love Beeple over on Instagram, because this artist is putting out a new piece of artwork every single day. And I guarantee by doing that repetition every single day is making you better and better and better at what you do. So Hugo talks about doing classes, repetition, pushing yourself, focusing on the end result, and having a level of standard that you always aim for. And I cannot stress how important this is. So as I mentioned before, repetition is important, but pushing yourself is too. If you're always doing the same work, you're not evolving. The more that you raise the bar, the more likely maybe you get 80% of the way there, but that's better than aiming for 50% and hitting on the mark. So each time you want to continue to evolve. Bob Iger, who was the CEO of Disney until a few weeks ago, where he's moving into his retirement period now over the next couple of years. But Bob would always talk about innovate or die. And that is how Disney Plus and all these other shows came to be, because he would have conversations early on with Steve Jobs about the future of TV and want to look at creating a streaming network before one existed. So again, the more that we innovate, the more that we push, and the more that we really look at what is possible and try to overshoot, it helps us really grow and go beyond the boundaries that we thought were possible. I've lost count of the amount of thought leaders I've talked to through friends and conversation, as well as through the podcast, where a lot of us would look back at our younger self, and our younger self would be like, that's impossible. There's no way I could do all that. But they obviously had. They pushed through and done it. And what they thought was impossible is now possible. And it makes you think, tomorrow, what is the impossible that I could go out there and make possible? This is how you do it. For me, there's so many things in my life I never thought I would achieve, but I was able to because I kept setting the boundary too high, and it meant that I kept pushing myself to get closer and closer and keep evolving and evolving. So again, this is so critical to always aim forward and keep pushing yourself rather than giving yourself easy goals that you know that you can achieve. So another thing that Hugo and I talked about was to understand that skill counts for nothing. We put so much focus and emphasis on learning the hard skills. In other words, being the best at our software, that by learning and focusing purely on that, we're the ones who become replaceable. Anyone can learn hard skills, and that's what gets you in the door, but a lot of the time it's like saying that you know how to type. It's just a surface level skill that's like pushing a bunch of buttons, and it's not allowing you to really have any depth. Soft skills. So these are going to be questions like, do you take feedback well? Do you give feedback well? If someone doesn't like something, how do you handle that? If someone gives you notes, how do you handle that? Do you give feedback like an a-hole, or are you more constructive with evaluating and discussing their work? So the further along in your career you get, the more important soft skills become, because you're less likely to be a replaceable button pusher at that stage. Hugo talked about improving your soft skills through the self-help route, leadership courses, emotional intelligence, and teamwork, to read up on all of these things. So I'm really surprised at the type of books that Hugo reads. I've read almost every single one of these as well, and none of the titles we've discussed had anything to do with art necessarily, yet all of them made a massive impact on my mindsets, both on the business side as well as on the creative. So some of the books we discussed was Good to Great, 11 Rings from Phil Jackson, I think, Flow, Man's Search for Meaning, Emotional Intelligence 2.0, as well as the 5 dysfunctions of a team, and many of the different business Harvard reports on leadership, self-management, and other related topics as well. And of course, the classics like Malcolm Gladwell, also How to Win Friends and Influence People, the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, as well as Robert Greene's 48 Laws of Power. So I thought this was really interesting because we talked a lot about that specific book and how the information in that book is really amazing. But at the same time, I think neither of us would really want to model ourselves after a lot of the cases in the book, because the people in there typically are not people that you want to be. But I think that the book itself and a lot of Robert Greene's books are really amazing. I'm hoping to get Robert Greene on the podcast later this year. That's a big goal that we have at the moment. So if you're interested in knowing more about these books, leave a comment below and let me know. I'd be happy to deconstruct a lot of the key takeaways of each of these books for you. And one thing I think is really important, Hugo referred to reading your way out of the problems when you're hitting a wall. And I couldn't agree more. Both from a learning standpoint, but also distracting your mind to allow you to solve the problems that you're consciously fixed on trying to overcome. Team skills. So this is really simple. Are your goals and your personal goals consistent with the project and the studio and the directors? So a lot of the time, people have goals that are different from the goals of the project, and that's when bad stuff happens. People are either too focused on how they can personally get ahead, or they're making the project all about them and how they can leverage everything that they're doing. Or they think they're making a Nintendo game when everyone else is making Doom. Another thing is, are you working well with the people in your department, and are you working well with the people outside of your department? So this is very surface level, I won't get too deep into it, but hopefully this makes sense. In other words, you need to align with the needs of the project and the people around you. In other words, it needs to be a flowing stream. If you're out to get you, or if your goals are miscommunicated and you think that you're doing one thing and you should be doing another, you need to course correct. So it's always good to be in check, to stay in communication, to make sure that what you're doing and the contributions to time, everything that you're doing align with everyone else. So that way everything flows rather than being out of place. Fundamentals. So this was more about the little things, such as showing up on time, not being a dick. The best examples Hugo could give was from the book The 11 Rings, which was written from Phil Jackson. So we talked about how you could be the Michael Jordan with your hard skills, making you the man. But then you're a complete a-hole with no soft skills. So nobody wants to work with you and no one's going to hire you, and word gets around pretty quickly. One of the key things I think is so critical beyond everything else that we both agreed on is that talent is just 50%. So some people can do the best work and be super fast, but they're difficult to work with. They don't play well with others and they make others feel insecure. This impacts the team, and those people are highly replaceable. Great teams make great games, and without that, you've got nothing. All of that is put in jeopardy when people act like jerks to each other. Talent is replaceable, hard skills are replaceable. Number 6, if you don't believe in your product, the audience won't. I just want to elaborate on this. Take pride in what you do and put in the work. I always say, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it to death, because there's no prize for second best and half-assed results aren't memorable. So show up physically, but also with charisma, enthusiasm, and with everything you've got. Number 7, never settle. So the last thing that we talked about was not getting complacent at the same job. And I think that this is such an important one, where it's very easy for us to go to a job and do really well. And maybe everyone around us is hyping us up, saying, you're doing such a great job. We just feel like, cool, like here I'm safe. Here I am, the king of my kingdom, or the queen of my kingdom. And because of that, we get lazy and complacent. And this is the ultimate poison that we can ever do for ourselves in our career. A lot of us have that big ambition, the things that we want to achieve, and instead, somewhere along the way, we get very comfortable and we start to slow down. And what is really valuable that Hugo talks about is moving on once you've gotten all the experiences you can from one place. As I mentioned earlier, sometimes he would just throw himself back into the wild and it would be live or die, fight for survival. He would go out there and force himself to get the next job. But either way, whether we're lining jobs up, I talk about this a lot in the podcast, making sure every lunch, every dinner, we're keeping in touch with everything going on so people know that we're available, we know when jobs are becoming available. And that way it becomes a constant flow where we're jumping from one job to the other rather than being stuck at one place while we hear about all the cool things happening around us, and bit by bit we become more and more replaceable, or we become more and more stagnant. This is where I think it's so critical that we never do that. We never get stale. I remember telling Hugo about when I was 21 years old, I was working in a place after having a very successful freelance career for quite a long time. And the problem was I got to a point where I was comfortable. And after a while, I started thinking, well, how scary is it out there? And I started having a lot of fear about going back out and not cutting it. Whereas here, I was a senior effects TD and I was doing all this amazing stuff. Things were great. Luckily, I had a friend of mine who knew what was going on. He could see it in me. So he started to apply for jobs for me. He would email all these studios and say, hey, this is Andrew. Just a heads up, I want to introduce my friend Allan. He's going to be applying for a job with you in a week. And he did that a lot. And me, I would be like, don't do that. What are you doing? But it forced me then to follow through and say, okay, well, here's a reel. And that forced me to get back out there. And then weeks after that happened, I went from leaving to go work on Happy Feed at Animal Logic and then waiting too long for that to happen because they're trying to get organized. So suddenly I'm in LA leading a project and working on Blade, and I never look back. But I do look back on that opportunity, that what if scenario. What if I stayed comfortable and I stayed at that place? What would happen? Because it's very easy to stick with what we know, and change is always scary. But when we're constantly pushing ourselves, aiming bigger, investing back in ourselves, making sure that we're moving and evolving and challenging ourselves, this is how we grow. This is how we get better at what we do. So this is so critical for you to always make sure that you're not stagnant, that you're not stale, that you're not staying complacent in where you are, and you're always moving forward. You're always looking at how I can push myself, how I can evolve, and how I can get better at what I do, so that way I get the new challenges and the dream job and the dream opportunities that I deserve. Lean into those pains, lean into those fears. Doing things like stand-up comedy or investing a lot of time into the areas that mightn't seem very fun, but they're going to equip you with the core knowledge, the substance, the things that you need to get better. Asking people to critique you on your work, but also to ask how you're performing as a person, as a team. All of these things are important. Most of us, not all of us, but most of us don't ever go to our employer and say, hey, what am I doing right and what am I doing wrong? Those of you who listen to my podcast probably do, because you know that's the best way to align your needs with theirs, and that's how you get what you want. I always say if I can figure out what they want, I can always get what I want a lot easier. We're all work in progress, and the more that we're leaning in and pushing ourselves rather than just slowing down, it might mean that, yeah, we're going to throw ourselves around and it's a scary time, but this is where we're able to evolve and get better results and get better opportunities. I get really annoyed when someone says that was an opportunity of a lifetime. There's only one opportunity and this was it. Because those who are successful are creating opportunities all the time. They're throwing themselves into situations where they're forced to create opportunities. And when they do have those opportunities arise, they're willing to say, okay, I'll do it because I'm ready for this. I've pushed myself and I've put in the time knowing that I'm ready for this moment to be able to shine and give it everything I've got. So again, this is the charisma, this is the push that a lot of us want to have. Without that, we become button pushers. So are you someone that has the hard skills, the soft skills, the team skills, the fundamentals, all of the necessary checklists to be able to evolve and give it everything you got to be able to get ready for those big opportunities so that way you're ready when they land? I hope you're getting this and I hope this is resonating. So that's it for me, but it's not it for you. I want you to take these key insights and put them into action. Which of these are you going to apply today, and how are you planning to put them all into action to make them stick? I would love to know what you got from this, as well as sharing your insights in the comments below. So this was an opportunity to deconstruct one of the hundreds of conversations I've had with thought leaders in the creative industry that I do on my podcast every single week. So make sure to check out the podcast. There's a link below this video as well. Don't forget to smash the like button and share this with others so that way they can benefit from it as well. That's the best way to give back, is to pay it forward. Thanks for watching, and let me know in the comments if you want to see more future videos like these. Even a simple yes helps me understand whether you find these videos valuable, so that we can keep making videos and giving value to you as much as I possibly can. Bye for now. Even a simple yes helps me understand whether you find these videos valuable so that we can keep making videos and giving value to you as much as I possibly can. Bye for now.